Hello and welcome to the March edition of Mytech U, a monthly educational series for technology and business topics. My name is Nathan Austin and I'll be your moderator today. This month we will be discussing March of 2018, 4 applications you're already paying for but not using. We are fortunate to have Jon Horner from Microsoft who will lead us through this topic today. So excited to have Jon. But before we turn the presentation over to him, a couple notes for the audience. Thanks for joining us today. This presentation for information is being recorded and will be available 24 hours after the presentation is completed. The audience is on mute. However, if you have a question, please use the questions section of the GoToWebinar control panel. And Stephanie and I will be doing our best to interject your question into the conversation or offline, or if we're not able to get to it during the presentation, we will follow up with you afterwards. So thank you very much again for joining us. And with that said, Jon, please introduce yourself and take it away.
Thanks, Nathan. Let's just verify that you can still hear me.
Everything sounds great.
Perfect. So thanks, Nathan. So as Nathan mentioned, my name is Jon Horner. I'm with Microsoft. I'm with a division called Partner Enablement. So what I am is I am support for Microsoft partners that are selling, deploying Microsoft products. I specialize in Office 365, more so in the SharePoint Online space. So that's where they kind of looped me in and said, hey, Jon, help us kind of deliver something to our customers that may help them. So let's go ahead and get started and take a look at our agenda for today. So our agenda today is we're going to talk a little bit about file server versus SharePoint Online. So some of you probably, most of you probably already have the capability of having SharePoint Online, but maybe you're not using it. And we'll talk about what the differences between a file server and SharePoint Online are and maybe the similarities. We'll also talk about collaborating and sharing in the cloud. And then we're going to move on to introduction to two or three things that you may not be using right now, but might actually help you be a little more collaborative and productive in your workspace. We'll talk about Microsoft Teams, Microsoft Planner, and then Microsoft StaffUp, which is something fairly new. So when we think about file server versus SharePoint Online, traditionally we think of a file server is going to be that physical box in your location. Maybe it's stuck in an IT closet, maybe it's underneath somebody's desk, but it's a physical box within your location. You're responsible for service, upkeep, backup, all of that stuff. When we move to SharePoint Online, we're in the cloud, so we're moving that infrastructure away from us, but we're also going to have to change the way we work with files a little bit differently. So traditionally in that file server, we've got probably one large folder that's called shared files that everybody either has mapped to their local computer that they can get to, but they go there through their file explorer and they access this large container of files. Inside of that, there's probably nested folders for human resources, marketing, sales, etc. And they probably have folders nested inside of them, which also have folders nested inside of them, and so on and so forth. When we move to the cloud or move to SharePoint Online, now we're kind of talking about 2 levels of content management in a way. We can have nested locations within a site, and we can have subsites or a top-down approach. So we think of maybe that company intranet or that top-level SharePoint as that blue shared files folder. Here we have, this is our access point for getting to our content. We can have different types of, we call them document libraries or lists within SharePoint Online, but in reality, what they are is a folder that you contain like, information. So we can have a document library that's geared towards documents. We can have a custom list that maybe is geared towards us doing some kind of a, maybe request forms or anything that we need a custom list for, maybe a replacement for an Excel file that we have on this file server. We can have a special kind of a document library that's geared towards media, so either videos or pictures, and within that kind of library, then when you look in the file, you can see a tile or a thumbnail that has a representation of the video rather than just a straight list of documents like you would in a file server. You can have a calendar, so we can have calendars that can keep track of dates and times and what's coming up and those kinds of things within our top-level SharePoint site, which can then be connected to your Outlook, so you can see it right from on your desktop within your Outlook calendar as well, rather than having to go out to the SharePoint site. Or we can have something like a task list that's made there to kind of give you a Gantt chart view of tasks that are upcoming or tasks that are due, and you can use this as task management. You can even have company announcements, things of that nature. So then in a top-down kind of, and some of those can have nested folders within them, some of them can't, but we can talk about that more closely if you guys would like later on. Then we have kind of, in the SharePoint, we like to do a top-down structure because we're in a SharePoint site. So then we can then kind of equate these top-level folders on our file server, human resources, marketing, sales, to a different site, a sub-site within our company intranet. And then because it's not simply a folder meant for just holding documents, you again can have all of these specialized things. We can have our own HR calendar, our own HR task list, our own HR picture library, things of that nature. You also then, in a traditional file server infrastructure, you probably have a home drive or maybe an H drive or something that looks like on your computer. That's where you save your stuff. It's your personal stuff that's not shared with anyone but you. But in reality, it's mapped back to this file server, so it resides in that physical location. OneDrive for Business is this counterpart, this replacement, if you will, when you're going to the cloud. It's meant to be your personal files. So how can we work with these files if we're used to kind of going to our file explorer and going to that map network drive, and that's how we work? We don't necessarily want to go out to the internet all the time to get stuff. Well, you can certainly go out to the internet if you want to. Go out to that web page, browse, and get there. Or you can use what's called the OneDrive synchronization client. Now, the best interaction that we have with the OneDrive synchronization client is if you're on a Windows 10 machine that has the Fall Creators Update installed, or what we call build 1709 for those kind of operating system geeks that know those numbers. And what this does is it allows us to create a synchronization from what's in the cloud to our local machine. So we still access things through the file explorer like we're used to, but now with this new client after the Fall Creators Update, we have what's available thing called Files on Demand. So we have the ability for all of these files to look like they're on our machine when they're actually in the cloud. And all we're seeing is a representation of what's available for us in the cloud. So we have a little cloud icon. That means that doesn't take up any space on our machine whatsoever. But if we want to click on it to open it, we can click on it and open it, and then it will download to our machine, and we'll see a little green kind of white circle with a green check mark in it. So that's available on our machine. It's going to stay on our machine until we decide we want to do something like free up space. There's another icon called the green box, a dark green circle with a white check mark. These files are always available. So these are things that you've chosen that you'd like to keep on your machine. So when we right click on any document or any folder, we have a couple options. We've got something here called always keep on this device. That's going to turn this into this green, this dark green icon, so that this just always stays on our machine. We know what's here. It's purposely, we've purposely said we want it here. And if we ever wanted to free up space on our machine, we could click free up space, and then things will turn to this white cloud icon. So you might think, well, why do you have this white circle with the green check mark and the green circle with the white check mark available there? This is going to allow you to maybe look at the way the status of the file, and you can understand, is this something I purposely said I want to have on my machine all the time? Or is this something that I just opened from the cloud, and in order for me to open it, I had to download, so now it's on my machine? So you can decide how you want to manage these files to free up the space you'd like. You can go document by document and say, I don't need these. You can go folder. You can go the entire sync location. That's totally up to you as the end user.
So John, I want to pause you there and first of all comment that this is, I didn't know this, that this feature that you just described, which is one of the gaps, and just for everyone listening, a common question we get asked from folks, different, business owners, operators, leaders, and organizations. They're trying to have this kind of discussion, is figuring out, do we need a file server? And can we use SharePoint Online? So some of the questions you were answering, like, here's a way you can kind of compare. There are some differences. But one of the biggest obstacles that really, I think, has prevented people from wanting to go down this route and use OneDrive to its full capability is this feature right here, because your servers and the amount of data you have on your servers is typically a lot more than what is available on your workstation. And you don't want to be keeping a lot of those files on your local machine. So it was difficult or size restrictive, prohibitive. You couldn't really do it to be able to have all your files available like what you just showed, because you can make them on demand through online only. That is an awesome feature, and I'm not just blowing smoke here for everybody, because this is one of the biggest gaps we've had. So if that's something you've been considering, this feature right here is something that can actually kind of overcome that obstacle that we've seen clients be really concerned about.
And,
so
and if
great.
if they've used the selective folder sync that came out with the next generation sync client, the kind of the move one step back from this newest iteration, we do still have that capability for you to pick and choose that I want to synchronize only these 5 folders and not this entire location, and you'll still get this experience with the files on demand. But with files on demand, there's no need to do that anymore. You can sync everything you've got to your machine, and I should say quote unquote sync, because you're not really synchronizing it until you click on it to open it, but you can sync everything there, and you don't have to have it all on your machine. So now my Surface Pro that only has 128 gigs of space still has access to my terabytes and terabytes and terabytes of content I have in the cloud. So one other kind of thing now, when we think about moving from that file server to the online space, to SharePoint Online, that we have to kind of think about and bear in mind is that we access, the way the Word client or any Office client picks things up is a little bit differently. So we're going to take an example of, we have a Word document, and notice that this Word icon says now Word Office 365. In the cloud space, we went away from now calling things Office 2013, Office 2016, Office 2019, or whatever the next one's going to be, etc., to just Office 365, because that isn't always up to date, and you never have to upgrade to the next version, so it's always up to date, and we're always pushing out little updates. But anyway, I digress a little bit there. So let's say we have a document that we've titled Completed Word Document. So when we access this from this traditional file server infrastructure, the first part that's in blue, the F:/shared file /marketing/December, the Office client, Word, looks at this as the blue part being, this is the location, this is where I got to go grab this file from, and Completed Word Document as being the name of the document. When we move to SharePoint Online, or even SharePoint on premises, because we're going to access things through HTTP protocol or through browsers and things of that nature, now we no longer look at the first part as the storage location, the second part is the name. The entire part is, this is the storage location and the name. So the Word client thinks of the entire thing as the name of the document. And you also see it on the bottom example, the %20 in red twice there. So operating systems, browsers don't like spaces. They run across them, they don't know what to do. So when we have a space in a document, we replace that with the %, the number 2, and the number 0. So I bring this up because there are some limitations for how long that file path name can be. So it needs to be fewer than 400 characters. This was recently upgraded. It used to be 260 characters, actually 256 characters. It's now been upgraded to 400 characters, so it gives us a little bit longer space, and we're nothing near 400 characters here. But if we have overly descriptive names, like an intranet site for a company in Bangalore, India, / marketing team's notes from December 19th / December 2018 quotes the coldest December in record. Something really crazy descriptive like that, we can get this 400 character limit very easily. So we want to try to talk about thinking about maybe not having those overly descriptive names, and we can get away from that by using something called metadata, or just columns within these documents. So instead of me having to create a folder necessarily that says Johnson Farms, December, tax information, something like that, we can create columns where we pick and choose that this file belongs to Johnson Farms, and we pick and choose that this file is for December, and we pick and choose that this is a tax kind of a file location. So we're getting away from having multiple levels of nested folders, but the information's still there within the documents, and then we can either sort by, filter by, group by that to give us an experience like it's in a folder, or we can simply come in and go, oh, I need to group by these settings, or I need to filter by these settings. And that'll help us kind of still keep that folder kind of infrastructure available without really stretching out and getting really, really long path names to our documents.
And John, I'll tell you, for those listening, if you've ever talked to someone who might have been an early adopter and trying to use SharePoint as a file server, I can almost guarantee you that some of their complaints would have probably been around this issue, where they couldn't keep the exact same string that they had used in their existing file server. So it wasn't an exact copy and paste because of that limitation. So this is one of the things I think it's important to illustrate. And I appreciate you really bringing that out, John, because this is one of the things that's hard to articulate. So you've done a good job here of explaining, like, this is what we can, it's the same kind of, but so it's more similar, but here's some of the nuances you have to, here's some of the nuances you have to be aware of, and also ways in which you can deal with it. So that's really good information, because I can tell you that this is a piece I'm going to show our clients that are making this consideration, just this part of this presentation. But I wanted to interject a question. So all right, so now let's say we've taken and if I'm stealing your thunder from another slide, forgive me, but now that we've taken, all right, we've made the decision, we're getting rid of our file server, we're moving into SharePoint, we've made all these adjustments, now we've got all the data in the cloud. Can you talk about backup? I mean, I know Microsoft and O365 has a backup, kind of. I don't know if it's revision. So can you talk about, well, what is that? I mean, we don't need to go into great detail, but this is a question from the audience as far as backup goes. Can you elaborate?
Before, I backed up purposely to get to this slide to talk about this top-down structure. So because of that 400 character level, we really don't want you to go deep nest like you did here. We want you to flatten things out and then use that metadata. So that'll help you keep those paths nice and short for you. But go back to the kind of the data backup that we're talking about. So our data centers, because for high availability disaster recovery type scenarios, we have your data in at least 2 data centers within your region all the time. So you have, let's say, for instance, you're from the Midwest here. I sit on our campus in Fargo, North Dakota. Our closest data center is probably in Chicago. So that's my default data center. But then I'm also replicated to a data center on the East Coast at the same time. So in case something happens to my Chicago data center, heaven forbid, a bomb or explosion or electricity goes out, whatever, we are rolled over automatically to that Eastern data center, and we immediately start then replicating that to another data center. So your data is always in 2 locations at one time. We back up all SharePoint data every 12 hours, and we retain that data, those backups for 14 days. So now, is that a huge amount? Not necessarily, but now with the things like we have the ability for you to restore your own sites if they're accidentally deleted, or restore documents if they're deleted from the recycle bins and the second stage recycle bins, you yourself have 90 days to restore anything that may have been accidentally deleted, corrupted, things of that nature. If we have come into a corruption scenario, which I have not heard of in a long time, we could fall back on the other data center. There are third-party products out there that you can back up your SharePoint OneDrive data to. That is going to be kind of each individual customer's preference on whether they feel they need that. With the recycle bins and the fact that we're always in at least 2 different data centers and we're backing up each data center every 12 hours, it's very, very unlikely that something's going to happen where you're going to lose your data.
So let me elaborate on that a little bit too. So thank you. That's very clear, because that's one of the things that I'd heard anywhere from 7 to 30 days. So knowing that it's 14 days with SharePoint is good. Redundancy is kind of given as far as, that's one of the things that you would expect from doing, just for those listening, like you should nearly always expect from, if you're subscribing to a service like O365, that there's redundancy built in, which, like you're talking about, replication of data, replication of services. But the key thing that's important to consider for your organization, as you were alluding to, John, is that on a case-by-case basis, what is your data retention requirements for your organization to meet your organizational needs? Like for instance, in some industries, there's data retention requirements to keep that for 7 years or 10 years, or you need to keep certain types of files, or those kind of things. So that's where alternate backup solutions or the third-party backup solutions come into play, because hypothetically, you could delete something, not know it was deleted, and part of your retention requirements that you're maybe required to adhere to, or that your business has defined as a requirement, you might not realize that data was gone until too late. So there are reasons why to do it. Again, but it is a case-by-case basis. We do see a lot of people just going with the default Microsoft backup, but there are a lot of, in fact, Mytech has a third-party O365 backup solution specifically to make sure that we complement or extend the default capabilities of O365. So, so thanks for asking the question, and John, thanks for your answer. I appreciate it.
Yep, and it's funny you brought up the the capability or the need to retain data for 7 years or things of that nature. That's what SharePoint is built for. The content management piece of SharePoint, and we'll talk a little bit more about this a little bit later on. But it's made for that. It's made for managing your document and the ability for you to say, okay, we're done with this document. Now we need to keep it for 7 years. We click a button, SharePoint moves it to a different location, creates what's called a record so that nobody can edit this anymore. They move it to a different location, and then they start the countdown timer. In 7 years, from today, it says, hey, we either, depending on what you set it up to do, it either automatically deletes the content or it alerts you and says, okay, it's been 7 years. What do we want to do with it? But going back to what we're talking about, kind of some of the other boundaries and limits, there are some links here, and I'll share the deck, and you guys will be able to get this a little bit after the fact. But there are some links out here to some internet sites. But one of the boundaries and limits are some characters that are not allowed to be in file names. There's in SharePoint Online and things of that nature, because again, we're accessing it over the internet. So things like the quotation or the asterisk, the caret, the colon, the question mark, / / pipe, they mean something in that address of the site or the address of the the location of that file. So we can't use those. Now, in the past, if you uploaded something to OneDrive that had one of these, you'd get an error and you wouldn't really know what it was. So whether that's better or worse than what happens now, I don't know. But right now, if you upload a file with one of these characters in there, you no longer get an error message. We upload the file and we just remove that character that's not supported. There's also some invalid file folder names, again, because they mean things to operating systems and things of that nature, OGS, PRN, null, etc. And then we can't create a folder name that begins with the tilde. So these are things that are kind of, because they mean something else to computers and to browsers, we can't allow them to be in the name of a file as well, because when we're opening that file, we're going to get to that / and we're going to think that it's a different kind of a file path location or something, and it's going to confuse the client, the Office client. And then we have types of files that cannot be added to a list or library. We've had several of these in the past. Now there are no restrictions on the types of files that can be added to SharePoint Online. So getting back to the content management thing we're talking about, more than just document storage. If you want to use SharePoint Online as just a document repository, meaning it's your file server in the cloud. Number one, we do not suggest copy pasting what's in your file server into a single document library in SharePoint Online. It will cause you nothing but headaches down the road. You want to think about it and plan out that structure. As we mentioned earlier on, some sites, subsites, things of that. Think it out and plan that out. But if you're doing it just for document storage, stay with your file server or move your file server to the cloud, something like that. Moving to SharePoint for just document storage is kind of like buying a Lamborghini, just simply because you need a way to get to work in the morning. When a bicycle might work for the 2 blocks that you have. You don't need to buy a Lamborghini. But it's more than just document storage. So the document lifecycle management that we talked about, that we kind of talked before, we can set up rules and things that happen, that we create the document, we maintain the document, and then we archive the document. And once we archive the document, what happens? Do we retain it for 7 years, etc.? Maintain and create through versioning and things of that nature within a SharePoint library. We can actually create a differing experience for what state the document is that a person sees when they open it, depending on if they have only read permissions or they have edit permissions. So this allows us to publish content monthly, and then update that content during the month. And then now coming up April 1st, we could republish that content, and what's changed from one to the next, we could do that. Maybe it's a parts catalog, you name it, but we can kind of do that through versioning. Business process workflow. We can set up one of those custom lists within SharePoint to do some things for us. We need a new computer, so we create a request within that tool that we have created with that custom SharePoint list that says, hey, I need a new computer. It notifies your manager or whomever needs to approve that. They then have the ability to deny or approve. We can do that right from the email they get, rather than them having to go out to the SharePoint list. They deny, approve, the user's notified, The purchase order can be created for them, they can be filed for them, whatever, depending on how we set these flows up. We could do some task and timeline management. You know, if we want to took the example of building a house, pour foundation, frame structure, interior construction, completion of house. We also have the ability to then take the information that we have in these SharePoint lists, maybe even combine it with some data we have in an on-premises SQL installation, or maybe some SQL in Azure data, and maybe even just an Excel file that has some stuff. We can kind of filter and funnel these all into a single report through what's called Power BI reporting. So you know, that allow us to give us a better look and feel and handle on what's going on within our business. So with that, let's move on to kind of talking about collaborating and sharing in the cloud.
Yeah, and John, just a time check. We are definitely running a little behind, but it's been good content, good questions. So that's okay. I just want to give a heads up for those listening.
We'll try to continue on here as quickly as we can. So
thanks.
Now we have OneDrive and SharePoint. We want to talk a little bit about what the difference is there. We already talked about it kind of in the file server area, but in OneDrive, we're thinking of, you know, OneDrive for Business. This is a place to store your files and access them easily from all your devices. SharePoint Online is a place to store company files and access them from all places. You know, you have the ability to share and collaborate on documents, you know, inside or outside your organization, depending on how you set those settings up within your administration center. The big difference is in OneDrive for Business, because it's your files, you control what content is shared with whom. And in SharePoint Online, because it's a company site, the IT department, company administrators, something of that nature, they control what is shared and with whom. OneDrive, again, is a special SharePoint Online document, SharePoint Online location, and it exposes just a single document library when you're putting files up there. So then that limits kind of how we share things or how we administer permissions. We can only share at a folder level or at the individual file level. And because we're sharing at that level, all we can give is the ability to view or edit, or if we think about that traditional file server, read only or edit permissions. Now, edit permissions also give the ability to delete. So we may want to, you know, give people the ability to edit things but not delete them. Well, in SharePoint, because we can manage those permissions at the larger level, either at the site level, the subsite level, or the document library level, we can create broader permission levels, and we can create a level, something like edit, but takes away the ability to delete. When we're going to share from a site, we can go into the site settings and the people and groups, and we can create. We always suggest, if you're not going to use the out-of-box owners, members, visitors groups, you can at least create, excuse me, something meaningful that lets you know that, hey, this is maybe the management team. So you can create a management team SharePoint group. You can also then create security groups within your Office 365 administration, add people into those security groups, add those security groups into SharePoint, and kind of makes it a little bit easier for you to manage those permissions. Or, you know what, you can share directly from the icon, and once you, this is a share icon on a site, and once you get in there, you can see you've got multiple levels here, which we're going to do the org admins, or all these different levels that we're going to share at. When we're sharing at a folder or a document level, we just really have two experiences. We have the classic experience, which opens up, and again, you can see only edit and view capabilities, and I should probably bring my laser pointer here. So you see we only have edit and view capabilities. And when we do the new experience, we just have an uncheck for allow editing. So again, it's only edit or view permissions that we're doing when we're talking about a document level or folder level. Again, we can share from the web. That's the same experience I kind of just showed, but we can share right from the Office application. And again, it's Office 2016 or the Office 365 client application. When we click on share, we get that exact same sharing experience here. If I click on this little down arrow, then I get all this information, and I would be able to uncheck the allow editing capabilities. Or we can actually share from Outlook 2016 or Outlook on Office 365 in something that we call modern attachments or cloud attachments. So we can share from the web. So within the Outlook client, we attach a file. We choose a web location, and we choose that web location. Then we get the option, are we sharing this as a OneDrive link, meaning a link to come back to our OneDrive and see it, or as an attachment? And then we can change the permissions on it if we're creating it a cloud attachment, giving people edit permissions, things of that nature. Or if we want to share it from our local computer, we again browse the file, attach it, and once we've attached it, we get the option, oh, do you want to leave it as an attachment, or would you like to upload it to one of these locations and share it as a cloud attachment? And that's what enables. Yep, go ahead.
Yeah, sorry, John, just to interject. Like, this is one of the things. So people like as images are more common to be shared and files are getting bigger, and we're trying to make sure, while there's tons of storage available, email systems still really have a limitation, typically of 10 to 20 megs as far as attachments. And so this is a good and better way, and oftentimes easier way than trying to do an FTP site or something like that. So this is kind of a cool way of being able to solve a relatively common problem. Doesn't happen every day, but like an example of the this PowerPoint presentation, like we wouldn't be able to email this PowerPoint presentation to everyone because it's too big from a size perspective, but we can get it to you in another way. So so stay tuned for that when you get the follow-up.
And another, security is another reason to use a cloud attachment as well. When I'm sharing this with you as a cloud attachment, I'm sending this across, and you're going to have to come to my OneDrive or my SharePoint to access it. And if you are unable to sign in and authenticate, you won't be able to see the file. If I send it across as an attachment, then of course that could be forwarded on to 1,000 people and they'll all be able to see that attachment. So that's another reason maybe to use the cloud attachment capabilities. And then again, this is all that gives us the ability to kind of do this sharing permissions and working together, co-authoring documents, staying in real-time co-author, things of that nature. With Office 2016 and what we're now branding as just Office 365 Office applications, we have co-authoring capabilities right within the Office client as long as your file is stored in SharePoint or OneDrive. So you don't necessarily have to be in the cloud to do the co-authoring. It'll happen right within your desktop application. Now, if you don't want to do these kind of things and you don't want to have the ability to have multiple people editing, then we can also make settings within our SharePoint library to where we force what's called a check-in, check-out, so that I check out this document, I'm editing it. You can still come, other users can still come and open that document, but when they open it, again, they're going to get to, oh, this file is locked for editing by John. You can see a read-only copy of what it looks like now, but you can't edit it. So that'll give you kind of that experience you have with a traditional file server where you can open it, but it's locked for editing. But so if you want that kind of a functionality or that feature set, we can certainly make settings to make that happen as well. So those are two areas where most of you probably already have that. Maybe some of it was just a touch up on kind of let you know how things go, but maybe not. But let's move into now and talk a little bit about three things that you probably you should have access to, but you probably have never even thought of using before. And first, we'll talk about Microsoft Teams. So what is Microsoft Teams? It's kind of a hub for teamwork in Office 365. So I kind of tell a story of it's one client, if you will, to rule them all. So there is a desktop Teams client that you can get, you put on your machine, and it's going to basically be the interaction between Teams, which is the chatting capability that's going to, Skype is going to be evolving into, we're going to call it Teams, and everything's going to be going through the Teams client for those chatting, the calling, the meetings, things of that nature. We can access our SharePoint content from these teams because every team creates a SharePoint location, and the document storage is in SharePoint on the back end, but this is a client to help you access that content without having to go out to the cloud. You can access your OneDrive content here as well, right from this application. So, we can open one client in the morning and we can start up a chat with somebody. We can have a meeting, or we can call them either through a VoIP call, or there will be PSTN calling conferencing capabilities where we can replace our desktop phones with this Teams client or an IP phone on our desk. Collaboration, deeply integrated with Office 365 apps. So we said the files is right here within the interface. Right within the Teams interface, this client, you can edit the Office documents there as well. You can edit them in this instance. We could open it up in the Excel client if we wanted to, or we could open it up in the web to edit it as well. Customize and extend, we have the ability to add other applications. So BeMind or Sappho, Poly, any other LinkedIn, maybe any other things that we have out there, we can create tabs within these Teams and the channels and things of that nature. So we can have a team available, make up teams for, our marketing team or whatever, which then can have multiple channels for marketing this product, product 1, product 2, product 3. We can have tabs available that link us out to different management capabilities. And then, of course, we can work with confidence because it is Microsoft Teams. It is a part of Office 365, so it falls under all the security guidelines that Office 365 has to offer. Teams for different departments. So again, you can make, marketing team could have marketing department could have a team, sales, finance, engineering, you name it. Here at Microsoft, we still use traditional SharePoint infrastructure for a lot of stuff. Our teams has been kind of an ad hoc. We create teams that we want to use for different facets and features. We started using Teams for calling and Teams for meetings. But if you had a smaller organization, you could maybe utilize the Teams interface as everything. You could store your documents right within that Teams interface, and everybody goes and works with Teams rather than going to SharePoint or going to their File Explorer. It's totally up to you. There is a mix and match, so you could use it as one tool, or you could use it as kind of the replacement tool for everything if you wanted to.
And again, so that's, yeah, thanks. Just going to interject. Oh, sorry, I didn't see you were going to do the resource, but just so everybody knows, like some of the features we've been talking about too, like I said, are either already built into O365 if you're currently subscribing there, and some of the sharing capabilities, as you mentioned, it's really important to note that it's either the web version of the Office tools or the current version of Office of 2016. That was one of the things that I've had a lot of people ask about, like, well, how can I do that co-editing thing and see what other people are doing and some of these capabilities? It's really the current version, and that's one of the things that, one of the reasons why we have been encouraging our clients to go and to consider when you're looking at Office to, instead of buying the product, just subscribe to it via O365, because Microsoft's going to keep it up to date, and all these new features that Microsoft is releasing literally on a daily basis are going to be just rolled in and updated into the system. So it's a totally different way of doing Office from where you've done it in the past, but you can see that there's some really cool stuff that Microsoft's doing to build new capabilities. So I always like to highlight that point. So thanks, Jon. Yeah,
and it's a nice way to kind of stay evergreen by going with that subscription version, because even though Office 2013 still works with Office 365 and SharePoint Online, and Office 2010 still does too, the farther you get away from the most recent iteration, the less of this quote unquote cool functionality is available for you. So if you go to Office 365 as that subscription version of Office, like I mentioned earlier, we stopped branding it as Office 2013 or Office 2016. It's just called Office 365. So it's just going to be an evergreen, always getting the updates as they come along, and it'll make your life a lot easier. Of course, there are going to be, you'll find some new things pop in and go, oh my gosh, what do I do with this? Well, if it's a new feature you don't need, you don't do anything with it. But if it's something you play around with and find that you like it, it's like, hey, great. My job here is that I kind of create PowerPoints, and they're not always the most flashy things available. But when my daughter graduated high school, I spent a ton of time making a really flashy PowerPoint we could play at graduation. Well, all those things that I learned there because I took the time to learn them there, I can learn them now. And the new features, some of the new things in PowerPoint with Morph and all that, there's some really great features out there that really can make amazing PowerPoint presentations. Move on. Next, we're kind of getting to the end of the time, so we'll kind of hurry along here. We'll talk quickly about Planner. So one thing I didn't mention with the Microsoft team, we have teams, we have groups, we have Planner, we have all these things that are kind of interjected, but anytime you create a Microsoft team, it actually will create you a Microsoft plan, and it creates you an Office 365 group, and that group is the security piece that allows people to access the files that are part of that team or that plan. And the planner is kind of going to be there for kind of project management light, if you will. So a traditional task management we have on the low level of complexity is individual task management. People, the people, they just keep a task list, or maybe you're using the to-do list in Office 365. Now there's a to-do list to kind of put your task down, or you're making sticky notes or whatever. We can go up to then work management. So maybe you could use a task list like we mentioned in SharePoint earlier, or you go all the way up to project and portfolio management, and probably the most popular customer that we have that really does project and uses it to its fullest is NASA. So that's a very complex project management tool. Most companies don't need that level of management. The task list can help, or Office 365 Planner. So Planner is available. You can quickly launch it through the App Store, or the app launcher, the little waffle icon in the upper left-hand corner. And once you get into Planner, you see things like kind of the high-level status of what's going on these projects. You can see if you favorite them, they're going to show up, and you're going to see their status. And you can see how many tasks are yellow, which are not started, red where they're behind, they're late, blue they're in progress, and green complete. You can kind of keep an eye on how is this task going, how is this project going along. You can view boards and kind of see what exactly is in these tasks. You can create buckets to help break things into departments or phases. So in the off to the left-hand side or right-hand side here, you can see a little thing that says add new bucket. You can create buckets, and then maybe you have different phases in this project. And once you've created a task, you can add new members very quickly, or once you can drag and drop members in and assign these tasks to them. Once they're assigned the task, they'll be alerted of these tasks. There is an option here to come back and look at my tasks, so each user can come look at their tasks. Your tasks are just assigned to them. It doesn't matter which project they're a part of. You can include pretty deep details in each task to kind of keep everybody informed. So even though it's not my task to complete, I could still come in and kind of take a look at it, and maybe I can go, hey, Patty, do you need some help on this? And we can certainly give her some help. We can label them, the colors up here, to maybe drive a little more attention, have conversations around there. See, there's a comments field down here, so we can have conversations around this task itself. Click and drop cards to update status or change. So, we can drop, if we have, maybe we have to do, we have completed, whatever, we can drag these tasks between any of these areas that we want. If we created it over here in the to-do and the elevator pitch, and it needed to be in managing and messaging and branding, we can simply just drag it right across there. We don't have to do anything fancy on the back end to move it from one bucket to the next, or delete it and recreate it. We can simply drag these tasks back and forth. Drill into these task metrics. We already kind of talked about this at the first slide, but once we see what the status is, we can drill in and we can say, oh, who are the people that maybe are behind and might need some help? Maybe these are the people we need to light the proverbial fire beneath and get them to get their task going, or maybe we forgot they had a task assigned to them and they've been on vacation for 2 weeks and there's no way they're going to get it done, so we might need to then assign that task to somebody else. We can browse and assign tasks from your My Task. I guess I already mentioned that. I got a little ahead of myself. You can organize tasks by status or plan, depending on how you want to see the tasks available for you. And if you want to learn more, you can always go out to these locations and learn a little bit more about Planner. Before I jump into the last thing, did anybody have any questions about Planner? I know we're barely out of time, almost out of time, but I want to quickly talk about StaffUp. The StaffUp is something you probably have not heard of yet, even though it's been around for a while. So with StaffUp, what StaffUp is a purpose-built app for the first-line workforce. So what is the first line? The front-line workers. A lot of times, a lot of our businesses, our people, our salespeople that run the counter, our cashiers, the medical staff, the nurses, things of that nature, maybe a factory worker. They're the people down there on the floor, the boots on the ground, doing the work, but they're the farthest away from maybe some of the fancy, technology that we have. So with first line workers, we have an Office 365 F1 SKU, that's geared towards first line workers, but we also now have this StaffUp application. And again, this is just some things about how first line workers have some unique challenges that we just talked about. But StaffUp here is a quick and easy schedule and task management, some communications and community, some training and onboarding and identity management for that first line worker. So we have the ability for us to create and update and manage schedules. We have the ability to create different groups or pods of people. So maybe think at the retail area, we have maybe a management staff that has to have a certain number of people on staff. We have sales people from, maybe certain people from certain departments have to be there. We have cashiers that have to be there, etc. We can come in, create these schedules within the web interface. There is an option, that if the schedules kind of stay the same week to week, you can actually just copy last week's schedule to the next week. And it's geared towards, we have mobile applications where the user themselves, that frontline worker, can download this application on their device, and they're always going to see their schedule. They can easily try to swap shifts if they want. They kind of stay in control of when their changes are made, etc. They have the ability to do things like offer up shifts or swap shifts with other employees. Communications and community, we have the ability to stay up to date with some communication channels. We can have private one-on-one conversations or broadcast a large message to the entire group. Coming soon, we have employee town halls and some Yammer integration. So it's a good way for us to push down information to that frontline worker who maybe we don't know if they go into the break room and see that notice pinned up on the board, or we can even eliminate the need to pin that notice up on the board. We can put these things within StaffUp and push that information down to them that way.
Yeah, and John, I think there's definitely some other cool things that O365 have, and that's just one of the unique applications that's coming out that you probably haven't heard of. There's several, like you mentioned, Yammer, that's been around, but people don't use it very much. There's Delve, there's other components that are pretty cool that are coming out that are available in O365. And that's one of the things that you'll see, just to mention to folks, that Mytech look for additional training going on later this year, where people can kind of opt into some training sessions around these tools and capabilities that you either already have because you're subscribing to it, or it could be an easy add-on. The last thing, I want to reinforce the message that you mentioned, John, around the apps, the mobile apps, because for everything that you mentioned on the conversation today, SharePoint, Teams, Planner, OneDrive, there are mobile apps that integrate with all this stuff, and they work really well. I use all of the ones that you mentioned today, and I have them on my phone, and they work great. So yeah, as you can see, there's a lot of stuff that's out there that if you're using Office 365, you probably have access to most of everything we just talked about today. If you don't, these are some of the capabilities that you can enable relatively inexpensively as you make some of those migrations and transitions. So John, yeah, I'll go over this, but any final comments as far as, I know we didn't get through exactly every last little detail, but I think we got through most of it here today. Any final comments to wrap up your part?
I would just say that, I'll make the deck available to you so you can share out with those that were on the call. And if anybody has any questions whatsoever related to anything that we kind of quickly ran over, reach out to you. And if you need to loop me in, that's what I'm here for. Loop me in, and we can certainly talk about Planner, Teams, StaffUp, or something like the new Business Center. There's so many new things that are out there available. That if anybody has any questions or wants to learn more, that's what I'm here for, is to help you guys learn more about them.
Awesome, John. I really appreciate your help and your support. I mean, Microsoft helping us out and being available to help us learn about it too, because like I said, there's some stuff here that was new for us as well. So I do like to call out for those of you who are in Minnesota, our Tech Pulse event is coming up on April 3rd. If you haven't registered, I'd love to have you. It's 36 different breakout sessions, 2 keynotes, lots of prizes. There'll be great content to spend investing on your business. And for those of you who are in Colorado, we're going to be out at the end of April, and we're going to be digging into some culture, and so it'll be an exciting culture engagement. So you can join us on April 24th in our Colorado office. So with that said, thank you all very much for joining us today. This recording will be available on our website, and everyone will get an email with a link to be able to download the copy of the presentation. Thank you, John, and have a great day, everyone.
Thanks, everybody.